Today we're going to start with Psalm 56. And so I'll read that. For the director of music, and remember, David is a musician, pretty good musician. For the director of music, to the tune of A Dove on Distant Oaks of David, a Mechtam, when the Philistines had seized him in Gath. Be merciful to me, my God, for my enemies are in hot pursuit. All day long they press their attack. My adversaries pursue me all day long in their pride. Many are attacking me. When I'm afraid, I put my trust in you. In God, whose word I praise, in God I trust and am not afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? All day long they twist my words. All their schemes are for my ruin. They conspire, they lurk, they watch my steps, hoping to take my life. Because of their wickedness, do not let them escape. In your anger, God, bring the nations down. Record my misery. List my tears on your scroll. And sometimes this is wineskin. Are they not in your record? Then my enemies will turn back when I call for help. By this I know that God is for me. In God, whose word I praise, in the Lord, whose word I praise. In God I trust and am not afraid. What can man do to me? I am under vows to you, my God. I will present my thank offerings to you, for you have delivered me from death and my feet from stumbling, that I may walk before God in the light of life. And in some cases, the verse 8 about recording and listing my tears, it keeps, another version was, you keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one in your book.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I was curious. It says you sing this to the tune of A Dove on Distant Oaks. And I was curious, are there any tunes that we still have record of that they actually sang back there? And when I looked it up, it says no, that there really aren't. There are interpretations and things like that. But apparently the dove on distant oaks symbolizes a person, specifically David, feeling isolated and vulnerable and far from home, but clinging to faith in God despite persecution. So a silent dove in a distant land representing a believer in a hostile territory. So apparently David was in a little bit of distress when he wrote this. It says that it was when he was when the Philistines seized him in Gath. But what do we know about the first time that David went to Gath? You remember that? The initial time that he was fleeing from Saul, and he first went to Nob and then to Gath, and that was where Goliath came from, and he was recognized. He was trying to get away from Saul, so he goes into enemy territory,
Is
and
that when he acted like an idiot? Like
yeah,
he was crazy? Yeah.
right. That was the first time that he went into enemy territory for fleeing Saul. And so he pretended to be insane by scratching on the drawers and drooling and whatever. So Saul says, "What are you bringing this crazy guy to me?" And they, let him and go. And David, that's when David went out to the cave, went out to the caves. And later he returns. And again, feeling trapped, he returns with his 600 men to Gath and lives there with King Ashish, over a year and so many months or whatever. So one of the things that was being symbolized here is human weakness. He's saying, I've got all these enemies, but When I'm afraid, I put my trust in you. And I think that we've seen that when David went out on the field with Goliath. We've seen that in a number of occasions. And when David was, even though Saul's following, trying to catch up with David and kill him, David had two opportunities to kill Saul and he didn't, because he says, who am I to kill the anointed one, of God? God will take care of it. God will take care of that. Any other thoughts as you were hearing this psalm? I like the thing about you keep track of all my sorrows. You keep them in a bottle, and I know that in Revelations, there's a passage that says you wipe away all my tears, wipe away all the tears.
I like the very last half verse, that my feet may walk before God in the light of life.
Mm-hmm.
And after he talks about all these terrible things, still thinks in terms of walking before God in the light of life.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Well, last week, where were we last week? We were in last week, the Philistines in chapter 28, we studied. The Philistines were camping at Shunem, and Saul was camping at Gilboa. And he saw the Philistine army with these hundreds and thousands, units with hundreds and thousands of soldiers, and he was in terror. He was really frightened. And he couldn't get any kind of response from God about. He tried, nothing was coming in his dreams, nothing was coming from the stones or the prophets. And so what did he ask for?
A medium.
Right. Mediums,
A ghost wife.
1-800 mediums. And the men said, well, we've got, you've sent all the mediums out, but we know of one in Endor. And Endor, I sent some maps by email, and you can see Endor is just below the Sea of Galilee, the bottom of the Sea of Galilee. I think you can have a little red dot by it on the black and white map that I sent. If some of you, I think that most of you have gotten that, but might not have printed it out or anything. And so he went to he kind of disguised himself and went to Endor, and he immediately, talked with the medium. And who did he ask for? And he was disguised. Okay? But then he asked for her to summon Samuel, who was dead. Okay. And he wanted to get advice from his old mentor, the one that had originally anointed him, and as soon as she consulted Samuel, she says, "You're Saul." So she knew at that point. And Samuel was saying, "What do you want me for? Why are you consulting me? God's departed from you, and it was my job to let you know that. And you didn't obey God." And so, Samuel fell to the ground, and he was in fear because of Samuel's words. And he wouldn't eat anything. And so the medium said, well, you need your strength. And so she was killing the fatted calf and trying to get him to eat, and he wouldn't eat. And then his men said, you got to eat. And so he finally did, and kind of got his energy back, and then went back to the encampment. Left that night and went back to the encampment. So we begin chapter 29 with the Philistine gathering their forces at Ephek. And I've got that down, Ephek down on the map too, so you can kind of see that, where that's located. And so let's see. Sarah, can you read 29?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
And the Philistines gathered all their camps at Ephek while Israel was encamped by the spring in Jezreel. And the Philistine overlords were advancing with hundreds and with thousands, and David and his men were advancing at the rear with Achish. And the Philistine captains said, "Who are these Hebrews?" And Achish said to the Philistine captains, "Is this not David, servant of Saul, king of Israel, who has been with me these many days or years? And I have found nothing amiss in him from the day he fell in with me until this day." And the Philistine captains were furious with him. And the Philistine captain said to him, "Send the man back and let him go back to his place that you set aside for him there, and let him not come down with us into battle, so that he become not our adversary in battle. For how would this fellow be reconciled with his master? Would it not be with the heads of our men? Is not this David for whom they sing out in the dances, saying, 'Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000s?'" And Achish called to David and said to him, "As the Lord lives, you are upright, and your going into the fray with the camp has been good in my eyes, for I have found no evil in you from the day you came to me until this day. But in the eyes of the Philistine overlords you are not good. And so now return and go in peace, and you shall do no evil in the eyes of the Philistine overlords." And David said to Achish, "But what have I done? And what have you found in your servant from the day I appeared in your presence until this day, that I should not come and do battle with the enemies of my lord the king?" And Achish answered and said to David, "I know that you are good in my eyes as a messenger of God. But the Philistine captains have said, 'He shall not go up with us to battle.' And so now rise early in the morning, you and the servants of your Lord who have come with you, and rise early in the morning when it is just brightening for you." And turning the page here. "And go." And David rose early, he and his men, to go in the morning to return to Philistine country, while the Philistines went up to Jezreel.
Okay. So it begins with Saul's army at the spring in Jezreel, and the Philistines with their hundreds and thousands in Aphek, and David ready at the back with Achish to follow and help fight against the Israelites. Okay. So it was kind of an odd sight, an odd contingent of Israelites at the rear ranks of the Philistines with their king, because remember, David was kind of being the bodyguard, for Achish there. And so the Philistine commanders see this and say, "What the heck is going on here? You've got these Israelites behind us." And aren't they going to possibly, they've heard about David. Isn't he the one that all the people are dancing and singing about Saul killing thousands and him killing 10,000s? He's a pretty
That
good
song just keeps coming back.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Keep that. They sang their dance and sang and danced, to these songs. And so, what are the Hebrews doing there? What was David doing there, in the first place? And we talked about David in enemy territories the first time, where he went in to escape Saul, and he was had to act like a crazy man, and finally went out, and was able to escape there again. But then back in chapter 26, after David had spared Saul that second time, remember he went down to the encampment and he took the spear and the jug of water, and then he went back on the mountain and says, hey, you guys, how come you aren't guarding your king correctly? And he went, and so Saul saw that David could have killed him again, and he says, "Oh, please forgive me," and he went back and returned home. But then David thought to himself in chapter 27, what one of these days I'm going to be destroyed by this guy. Best thing I can do is escape to the land of the Philistines, and then Saul will give up searching for me. And so that's the second time that he went back, and that's what he's doing there right now. And so he moved to Gath, and it worked. when he moved in to Gath and was living there for a while with his men, uh, it said that Saul forgot about him and no longer searched for him any longer. So that strategy did work for him. And to gain autonomy in Gath, he was telling Ashish, I shouldn't live in Gath, in the capital city with you. You should give me someplace where I'm kind of out, on the edge of things, that I can take my men and we can live and still serve you. And so he gave him the city of Ziklag, okay, a little country town of Ziklag. And David moved there, and he proceeded to um, start raiding foreign tribes, he said. But and Ashish was kind of keeping tabs on his activities. So periodically he'd ask him, "Hey, who have you been raiding?" And David would answer, "Oh, I've just been raiding the desert people of Judah and the Jerahmeelites and the Kenites, and they were inhabited by people, loyal to Israel." But and so he gained Ashish's trust. Okay. And in reality, however, what had David been doing? He had been raiding the Amalekites, longtime enemies of Israel, the Jerizzites and the Jeshurites. And they were all people in the southern territory of Israel's territory. And he had been taking um, the what do you call it? The stuff, the plunder, and giving it to strengthen the people in southern Judah. Okay, so he was kind of building up and strengthening southern Judah, but making Ashish think that he was plundering people that were Israelites, so gaining his trust that he was actually could be trusted in going into battle with Saul.
So basically, what I'm hearing is that he was lying and murdering and stealing.
Yes.
So that's three of the seven commandments.
And when he did it, he would kill everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because he didn't want word to get back to Ashish what he did. So he would make sure that everything was gone.
And again, this makes me question whether or not at that time they believed the Ten Commandments bound them in their behavior to people that were not part of their group, their tribe.
Well, even God had told them to kill every Amalek, every
there was
Amalekites that you can find,
Yeah.
So even if there was do not kill, it was still, God had told them to do it told David to do it at one, or Saul to do it at one point. He didn't pay any attention to him.
Didn't fully comply.
Right? He saved some of it, he saved some of the plunder and whatever. So then in 28, we find, just before this chapter we just read, we find that when the Philistines were gathering their forces to actually fight Israel, Ashish said to David, you must understand that you and your men will accompany me in this army. And David said, very well, then you'll see for yourself what your servant can do. And Ashish says, very well, I'll make you my bodyguard for life. Okay.
All right, so he's conned Ashish.
Yes, he's conned Ashish, and we can
but he's still supporting Judah.
And we can see that that Ashish was really for David. He wanted him to go into battle with him, but the commander says, "Hey."
Yeah, the other Philistines were like, I don't think this is a good idea.
No way. And they were angry at Ashish for even suggesting that David be behind them. So they were some smart cookies. They probably knew a little bit more of what was going on, I would suspect, than Ashish did. So but they complained, and then the way that they did it was like, what are these Hebrews doing here? And I know that Kirsch, our commentator in the book that I was looking at, was saying that that might have been a derogatory statement. Like, what are you doing with these Hebrews? And remember, Hebrews, people were calling them Israelites at this time. Hebrews were before Abraham had been, let me find where my notes are about that. Where while Hebrew was not always a derogatory term, it was used by the Philistines to emphasize the otherness and inferiority of the Israelites during this period of oppression. So what about these Hebrews instead of what about these Israelites? Okay.
Well,
And
Hebrews implied, Hebrew, I think, means step forward or to leave. So it was kind of like saying this bunch of illegal immigrants,
right. And the Hebrews were kind of more of a nomadic soldiers of fortune, that type of thing. And even Kirsch was saying that there was another word that that the Bible scholars had discovered, a Hebrew, Habiru, and he goes into a long dissertation about how that Hebrew word, which might have been confused as Hebrew or whatever, was in some documentation, official documentation about these marauders coming in, like Harold said, aliens or foreigners, or coming in and pillaging small farms and things and taking the plunder and everything.
Well,
And
they
at
did
their
wipe out all
time.
the Canaanites to take the
Yeah.
land. So,
Yeah, that's right. And so having the Hebrews who waged war throughout Canaan at that time. And so Bible scholars were thrilled. They said, "Oh, this is showing the Hebrew and the Hebrews are the same people, coming in and doing this kind of thing." So it says that Hebrew is best understood as a term for fugitives, refugees, bandits, illegal aliens, as Harold said, fugitive marauders that descended and plundered towns. And so they, and in the Bible, generally, when someone calls them Hebrews, it's going to be someone who's not non-Israelite, like the foreigners, the Philistines, the um, um, and other people that were not, Jewish at that time. Um, what do you think? Was David only bluffing when he offered to go to war against Saul? Had he meant all along to be loyal to Israel? He didn't have the opportunity, did he? Yeah.
It's
One of
complicated.
yeah, one of the commentators had said that, this particular story shows that the rejection of David by the commanders to fight with them for the Philistines could have been a gift from, could be seen as a gift from God. Okay, God didn't want David to be there. Okay. David was ready to fight against Saul and God's people until the Philistine lords turned him away. God had another destiny for David as the leader of Israel rather than their adversary. When we experience rejection, even rejection that seems unfair or unjust, remember how David's moment of rejection changed the trajectory of his life for the better. So we move then into chapter 30. Okay, and Ashish is has sent at the end of this chapter. It was David and his men got up early and went back to the land of Philistine. They were going back to Ziklag, where David's little, town, where he conducted all of his raids, to strengthen Judah. Okay. And so if someone could read the first 6 verses of chapter 30.
I can do it.
Okay.
First 6 verses.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when David and his men came to Ziklag on the 3rd day, the Amalekites had made a raid on the Negev and on Ziklag. They had attacked Ziklag, burned it down, and taken captive the women and all who were in it, both small and great. They killed none of them, but carried them off and went their way. When David and his men came to the city, they found it burned down, and their wives and sons and daughters taken captive. Then David and the people who were with him raised their voices and wept until they had no more strength to weep. David's 2 wives had also been taken captive, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. David was in great danger, for the people spoke of stoning him, because all the people were bitter in spirit for their sons and daughters. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God.
Now, remember back in chapter 27, David had been raiding the Amalekites. Now the Amalekites raided Ziklag. But when David raided the Amalekites, he didn't leave. It says he did not leave a man or woman alive to be brought to Gath, for he thought they might inform on us and say, this is what David did. And such was his practice as long as he lived in Philistine territory. So he would kill them all. And yet here the Amalekites come, raid Ziklag, and don't kill anyone. They take everything. Okay. And it says that they didn't kill anybody, but did David and his men know that at the end of this sentence, at the end of this passage? No, they think they're all gone.
Well, they would have seen the bodies if they were all dead.
Oh, well, that's true. Unless, yeah, that's true. You're right. You're right. I didn't even think about that, Harold. Duh. Okay, so it's not surprising that the Amalekites raided Ziklag, and his men were really upset and ready to stone him now. The people that had been following him all this time, because of his folly, they say, in leaving Ziklag undefended, while they went off to fight with the Philistines. So they were ready to put him to death right there. And we'll learn what David does in the next passage, and that is 7 through 15. Anyone can read that? If not,
I can do it
okay.
if nobody else is volunteering. David said to the priest Abiathar, son of Ahimelech, bring me the ephod. So Abiathar brought the ephod to David. David inquired of the Lord, shall I pursue this band? Shall I overtake them? He answered him, pursue, for you shall surely overtake and shall surely rescue. So David set out, he and the 600 men who were with him. They came to the Wadi Besor, where those stayed who were left behind. But David went on with the pursuit, he and 400 men. 200 men stayed behind, too exhausted to cross the Wadi Besor. In the open country, they found an Egyptian and brought him to David. They gave him bread and he ate. They gave him water to drink. They also gave him a piece of fig cake and 2 clusters of raisins. When he had eaten, his spirits revived, for he had not eaten bread or drunk water for 3 days and 3 nights. Then David said to him, to whom do you belong? Where are you from? And he said, I am a young man of Egypt, servant to an Amalekite. My master left me behind because I fell sick 3 days ago. We have made a raid on the Negev of the Cherethites and on that which belongs to Judah, and on the Negreg of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag down. David said to him, Will you take me down to this raiding party? He said, Swear to me by God that you will not kill me or hand me over to my master, and I will take you down to them.
So, to divert their attention, David calls the priest and says, Bring that ephod over. Okay. And remember, that's like a sacred apron-like vestment worn by the high priest, and it's made of gold and fine linen or whatever. It serves as a symbolic object for inquiring of the Lord and representing the divine presence. And so David is using the same ploy he did before when his men were too frightened to carry out a raid, where he called to roll the stones, throw the dice, and see what God says. And so he used that same kind of a ploy to these men, and it worked again. Okay, it silenced them because they said, "Hey, God says that we're going to get everything back, if we pursue them." And so they all lined up behind him. They're all going to line up behind him and follow him. So usually those stuff, when they call for that, it's either yes and no answers. But our commentator says that this is kind of written more like a conversation with God, where God says not just yes or no, but that instead of pursuing, you're also going to find them and you're going to get everything back, kind of a thing. So it was no easy job. They headed off, but they were in some unfamiliar territory, apparently at that time, when they were trying to go after the Amalekites raiding party. And they had they were 2 days ahead of them, but they found this Egyptian slave that had been left behind. And he was apparently ill. So they fed him up. And after David agreed not to kill him or return him to his master, he said, I'll take you to the party. I'll find the raiding party for you.